Good afternoon. I'm Michael Sanders, and this broadcast is coming to you from the auditorium of Canterbury Woods. We take it for granted that popular songs should be about love, and certainly in our culture, nearly all of them are. You think that though other cultures in the past have sung about things like the love lives of the gods, or the histories of the names of geography, or great heroes and great battles. Well, we decided that we would sing about love, and it's a good thing too, because 2 days before Valentine's Day, it's awfully nice that we have this wonderful treasury of American songs, popular songs about love, what we call the Great American Songbook. So my plan today is to dip into that collection, to do about a dozen of the songs that should be familiar to many of you. In addition to playing some of those songs, I would like to play four, I guess you could call them classical piano pieces written in the 19th century, pieces that the composer called romance. And I'll talk a little bit about that down the road. The composers, though, are Bizet, Robert Schumann, Chaminade, and Xaver Scharwenka. So that's our plan. And today I'd like to begin with It Had to Be You. Gus Kahn and Isham Jones are the composers of this song. You might know it from When Harry Met Sally, but in fact, it's appeared in something like 16 movies and television shows. Anyway, it's a great song, and It Had to Be You. Thank you. The next song comes from a musical that I don't believe has ever been done since its first run. The musical was called St. Louis Woman. It was written by two wonderful composers, two wonderful artists, John A. Mercer and Harold Arlen. It was their last work together. It was written for Lena Horne, in fact. But when she got the music was wonderful. Words were wonderful. The book, which is to say the dialogue and the plot, was just terrible. It was terrible and offensive. And eventually, Lena Horne refused to do the part. And when the show opened with Pearl Bailey in the starring role. The NAACP was picketing it in the street. So that was not successful. But as I say, the songs themselves are wonderful. And this is maybe one of the best. Come Rain or Come Shine. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to turn to the music of Georges Bizet, famous for the opera Carmen, probably the most beloved opera, most frequently performed in the world. And you might wonder, what else did he write? Well, he was a brilliant student, brilliant pianist, brilliant composer. He had a 5-year scholarship after he graduated from the conservatory to go first to Rome and then to Germany. While he was in Rome, he became friends with Franz Liszt, the greatest pianist of the time, maybe of any time. And at a party, Liszt had a new work, and Bizet sat down and sight read it perfectly. And Liszt said, "I had thought that there were only 2 people in Europe who could play this piece. Now I know there are 3. So that was maybe one of the high points of his life. When he came back to France, he discovered that nobody was interested in the operas that he wanted to write. He spent a lot of his life, a lot of his energy doing hack work, arranging other people's scores, proofreading, that kind of thing. During this early time, he wrote some piano music, which was really too difficult for the audience that he hoped to reach. And he also wrote some songs, some wonderful songs. He later took 5 of those songs. And when I say song, I mean a piece for voice and piano. And he made arrangements for piano alone of them. And he called those 5 romances. I'd like to play the second of those 5. It has the name, The Song of April, Chanson d'Avril. So here's the Chanson d'Avril of Georges Bizet. Next, I'd like to play a piece by a little-known composer, Irving Gordon. It has the unusual history of being, first of all, a great hit by Nat King Cole. And then 40 years later, after Nat King Cole's death, it became a great hit for his daughter, Natalie Cole, sung through the miracle of technological ingenuity as a duet. You probably know what I'm thinking of. But the song that I'm thinking about was not given the name that we know. In fact, the song was originally named Uncomparable. Uncomparable. This is so wrong for so many reasons. Only one of those reasons is that most of us are likely to say incomparable rather than uncomparable. But it's just a terrible name. And fortunately, some publisher persuaded him that really the name of this song should be Unforgettable. And that's how we know it. So I'd like to play for you now Unforgettable. Or if you insist on it, Uncomparable. Thank you. The next song comes from a show from 1928 called Macon Whoopee, written by Kahn and Donaldson. And the song is an arrangement by Brent Edstrom. I'll be playing several of his excellent arrangements this afternoon. Brent Edstrom is the arranger, and the song is Love Me or Leave Me. Thank you. Now I'd like to return to Europe for a romance by Robert Schumann. Actually, both he and his wife, Clara Schumann, wrote romances, wonderful romances. Robert Schumann wrote 3 of them and collected them in his opus 28. Now, I don't think it would strike us that the first and the third were particularly romantic, but the second one is one of the most wonderful pieces I think Schumann wrote. It's, in many ways, it's almost like an operatic duet where the thumbs of the 2 hands play the duetting voices. He marks the music einfach, which means simple, but it's not particularly simple. He required 3 staves instead of the usual 2 to write the music, and he wrote the piece in 6 sharps, a fairly unusual key. But that hasn't kept lots of people from enjoying and loving this piece. So anyway, here is the romance in F sharp major, opus 28, number 2 of Robert Schumann. Thank you. Now here is a song from Lerner and Lowe's imperishably wonderful musical, My Fair Lady. This is the last song in the show. And in the song, Rex Harrison, who plays Professor Higgins, has just learned that Eliza has left him to marry Freddie. He is furious, he is insulted, he is full of plans for revenge, deeply hurt, deeply wounded, and he's suddenly realizing how terribly he will miss Eliza. And so he sings this song, I've grown accustomed to her face. That perhaps is not the most romantic thing that a man has ever said about a woman, but it's what Rex Harrison has to say, and it's perhaps the most romantic ending of any musical I know, when she finally steals back in and speaks to him in Cockney. I'm going to leave out all of the revenge and all of the anger and all the stuff, and just play the part of I've grown accustomed to his face, which expresses his true love, true tenderness. So, from My Fair Lady, I've grown accustomed to her face. Thank you. Now a song by Freed and Lane called How About You? I think most of us know the chorus, but they don't very often perform the verse, which kind of explains the story. So I'd like to read you what the words are of the verse. They're kind of amusing, too. The singer says, "When a girl meets boy, life can be a joy, but the note they end on will depend on little pleasures they will share. So let us compare." And then it says, "I like New York in June. How about you? I like a Broadway tune. How about you?" And so forth. So here is How About You by Freed and Lane. Thank you, thank you. The next song, next composition, was written by Cécile Chaminade, perhaps the most economically successful of all women composers. She had the good sense not only to be pretty and a wonderful pianist, but also to marry a music publisher. So nearly all of her music was published and quite popular until her older age, when she was supplanted more by other composers, Debussy particularly. Anyway, not only was she successful in Europe, but she was successful in the United States. Though she hated the trip across the Atlantic Ocean, she was very popular all over the United States. music clubs sprung up called Chaminade clubs, where music was performed by women for other women. This was, in fact, the beginning of one of the nucleuses of the suffragettes movement in the United States. Your grandmothers may have been involved in Chaminade clubs. The piece that I'm going to play for you now is called Romance. It's the Romance in D. She wrote several. This one is Opus 137. So, Romance in D by Chaminade. Now I'd like to play a song written by Kurt Weill, a great German-American composer, and with words by, of all people, Ogden Nash. You may know his comic poetry, but he wrote this for a musical called A Touch of Venus. It's called Speak Low, and it's a reference, of course, to a line in a Shakespeare play, Much Ado About Nothing. One of the villains says, "Speak low if you speak love," meaning keep your voice down if you're talking about love. But Ogden Nash takes this and sort of repunctuates it and makes it Speak low if you speak, comma, love. So that's the song that we'll hear. Speak Low from A Touch of Venus by Kurt Weill. And to go from low to high, the next song is How High the Moon. Words written by a woman, Nancy Hamilton. Music by Morgan Lewis. This song, of course, very, very popular. Almost a signature song for Ella Fitzgerald. Many other singers have sung it, but it's especially a magnet for jazz players. Not just the tune, but the harmonic sequence. In fact, several jazz people have taken and made their own song with the same harmonic sequence. The most famous case of that was Charlie Parker, who wrote a song called Ornithology, based on exactly these harmonies, but with his own melody. By the way, Ornithology is a reference to his nickname. He's Charlie Bird Parker. But there were other composers, almost a who's who of a certain period of jazz players. Lenny Tristano wrote a song on it. Coleman Hawkins, John Coltrane, all these people wrote their own songs, own independent melodies on this tune. But I'm going to play the tune just as it was originally written. It's a beautiful song, How High the Moon. Thank you. One more. A romance. This is actually called Romanze Ro. It's like the German word for romance with a ro at the end. I have no idea just why that is so. It seems like it's a Spanish name, but the most likely connection is with a book of poems by Heinrich Heine, the greatest German poet, really, after Goethe. Anyway, it's called Romanzero, and it was written by a man named Xaver Scharwenka, Polish. His brother, Filip Scharwenka, was almost a mirror image of him. Both of them were concert pianists. Both of them were composers. Both of them were the heads of musical conservatories, at least for a period of time. I think that the younger brother, Xaver, was one of really the great unsung composers of the 19th century, at least for piano. I think a wonderful composer. This Romanzero is marked leidenschaftlich bewegt, which means passionately moving. That's the first theme. And the second theme is this wonderful, lush, romantic theme. It might have come from Brahms or maybe from Rachmaninoff. Anyway, I hope you will enjoy this Romanzero by Xaver Scharwenka. Thank you. Well, I'd like to thank our wonderful technical staff, Blanca Garcia and Jovan Snare, and Keith Clark, Keith Chase, who is making the recording for our YouTube posting. Those of you who celebrate Lunar New Year, happy Year of the Ox to you today. And I'd like to finish with a song by Rodgers and Hart. What else but My Funny Valentine. There's a story that there's an autobiographical element to this song. Mosshart, who wrote the words, considered himself to be too short and too ugly to ever be deserving of love. And that may have something to do with the words of this song, but I think for the rest of us, it gives us a little bit of hope. No matter how funny we may think we look, there's probably somebody out there for whom you will be their funny Valentine.